October 7th, 2023. That's a date that completely shattered a very fragile status quo, and it plunged a whole region into a devastating war with consequences felt all over the world. So to really get a handle on this conflict, we need to look at what came before, what happened during, and tackle the really critical questions about what comes next. And this quote from the Combating Terrorism Center at West Point, it really gets to the heart of the puzzle. How could one of the most advanced intelligence networks on the planet be caught so completely off guard by a group that had been watching for decades? The analysis suggests this wasn't just a failure to see a warning, it was, a failure of imagination.
So, to understand why this was such a massive shock, we've got to rewind a little bit and look at the calm that came right before it. But as we're about to see, this calm was built on some incredibly shaky and flawed assumptions.
Okay, this slide shows a really stark and, frankly, dangerous disconnect. On one side, you have the Israeli strategic thinking, the belief that Hamas was basically contained, that they were more interested in governing, and that money from Qatar was essentially buying quiet. But then you look at the reality for the 2.3 million people in Gaza, a blockade that had been going on since 2007, absolutely crushing poverty, and a majority of people not knowing where their next meal was coming from. That huge gap between the premise and the reality, well, it created the perfect conditions for a catastrophe.
And then, on a quiet Saturday morning, that gap didn't just crack, it completely exploded. The violence that erupted just shattered that illusion of containment and kicked off the longest war in Israel's history.
The attack was just unbelievably brutal, and it was meticulously planned. Militants came across the border by land, by sea, and even by air. They went straight for civilian communities, places like collective farms called kibbutzim, nearby towns, and even an outdoor music festival, and just unleashed horrific violence. The scale of it, the nature of it, it was all designed for maximum shock. And it worked.
Just look at that number, 1,195 people killed. It's staggering. For Israel, this was a national trauma on a scale they had never experienced. It was the deadliest single day since the country was founded. To give you some perspective, The Economist pointed out it was the most Jews murdered in a single day since the Holocaust. This wasn't just an attack. It was an event that would completely reshape the nation's psyche.
So an attack like this, on this scale, immediately raised a huge question that dominated everything that came after. How? How was this possible? And where were the intelligence agencies?
And that is the question. It's what Israeli society and security experts all over the world are still trying to figure out. Was it a lack of information? Was it a failure to connect the dots? Or was it that leaders just refused to listen to the warnings they were getting? To really get this breakdown, we need to understand a key concept from the world of intelligence analysis. It's called mirror imaging. It's basically a cognitive bias where you assume your enemy thinks like you, that they share your logic and your values. The thinking in Israel was that Hamas, as a government, wouldn't risk a war that would destroy everything they'd built. They assumed Hamas was a rational actor, but in their terms. And that was a catastrophic miscalculation. And when you lay it all out on a timeline like this, wow, it's just a staggering pattern of missed signals. The thing is, it wasn't a lack of data. I mean, way back in 2016, there were hints of what Hamas wanted to do. By 2022, Israeli intelligence literally had the battle plan, but they just dismissed it as aspirational, too ambitious to be a real threat. Even direct warnings in the months and weeks leading up to the attack were reportedly ignored, right down to the final hours, when a huge signal, hundreds of new SIM cards activating in Hamas networks, still didn't trigger the highest alert. Every single point on this timeline was a chance to prevent disaster.
So what does this all add up to? Well, the West Point analysis is pretty clear. This wasn't just one person or one agency dropping the ball. It was a systemic failure. The political leaders underestimated the threat, the intelligence collectors were maybe too reliant on technology, and the analysts got trapped by their own assumptions. It was quite literally a perfect storm of errors.
And the response to that failure and to the attack itself was swift, it was massive, and it would become the longest and deadliest war in the history of the conflict for Palestinians.
Within hours, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu declared the country at war. The goals were absolute: destroy Hamas's ability to govern and to fight, and make sure an attack like this could never, ever happen again. A complete siege was put on Gaza, and a massive ground invasion was set in motion.
The human cost of this war, it's just been immense. The total number of people reported killed has surpassed 71,000, and the vast majority of those, over 69,000, have been Palestinians killed in Gaza.
On top of that, the war has created a displacement crisis that is almost impossible to comprehend. Nearly the entire population of Gaza, that's 2.3 million people, have been forced from their homes, many of them over and over again, trying to find safety in a place where, honestly, nowhere has proven to be truly safe.
And the ground invasion has fundamentally changed the territory itself. By this point in the war, the Israeli military was in control of more than half of the Gaza Strip, and the landscape has been permanently altered by just widespread destruction.
You know, what started as a regional conflict didn't stay that way for long. It quickly spiraled, sending shockwaves that have been felt all across the globe.
And those consequences have been so far-reaching. Inside Gaza, a full-blown famine. Regionally, the war spilled over, leading to clashes with Hezbollah, attacks by the Houthis in the Red Sea, and even direct conflict with Iran. Legally, the whole thing landed in the world's highest courts, with accusations of war crimes and genocide. And in societies all over the world, it sparked massive protests and a really disturbing rise in both anti-Semitism and anti-Palestinian racism.
Diplomatically, you can see how the war has just exposed these deep global divides. On one side, you've got traditional allies like the US and Germany providing critical support for Israel. But at the very same time, you have this growing number of other nations taking concrete steps against Israel's actions, pulling out their ambassadors, and in a really significant shift, you have European countries like Spain, Norway, and Ireland formally recognizing a Palestinian state.
And so this is where things stand now. We've got these major international legal battles playing out, a humanitarian catastrophe that's ongoing, and absolutely no agreement on what comes next. The war shattered all the old assumptions, but a clear path to any kind of stable peace seems more out of reach than ever. And that leaves us with the biggest, most important question of all. What is it going to take to finally break this devastating cycle?